Nobody in the gold mining world wanted to touch that claim anymore. It had been picked over, drilled, dug, and written off years ago, and every company that ever put a shovel in that ground walked away with nothing but losses to show for it. But now, that same forgotten patch of dirt is the only thing anyone in the industry is talking about, because a miner named Cole Whitman looked at data everyone else had thrown away, and what he found buried underneath could be worth close to $1 billion. Before we get into exactly what he uncovered and why even veteran geologists are stunned, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is still unfolding and you don't want to miss where it goes next. Years before Cole Whitman ever set foot on that ground, it had already earned a reputation as a graveyard for mining money. Several companies had poured serious capital into it, running heavy equipment for months, moving tons of earth, drilling wherever the old maps suggested gold might be. And every single time, the answer came back the same. The claim was tapped out. There was nothing left worth chasing. Eventually, the crews packed up, the machines rolled off the property, and the camp that once buzzed with activity went quiet. People stopped mentioning the place entirely. It became just another entry in a long list of claims that didn't pan out. That might have been the end of the story, except Cole Whitman never fully accepted the old verdict. He wasn't interested in repeating what previous companies had done. Instead, he started asking a different question. What if those earlier operations had only ever scratched the surface, and the real gold system was sitting much deeper than anyone had bothered to check? That question sent him digging, not with excavators, but through old geological surveys, historic borehole logs, and drilling records that have been sitting untouched for years. He spent days going through paperwork most people would have considered a waste of time. But the more he read, the more he became convinced that this claimed story wasn't actually finished. Some of those old maps showed subtle geological patterns that nobody had thought to connect. A handful of borehole reports hinted that previous drilling might have missed the real target by not going deep enough or wide enough. That was the moment Cole Whitman decided this abandoned claim deserved one more look, this time with modern tools nobody had used on it before. At that point, nobody around him imagined that a piece of land the whole industry had already given up on could turn into the center of a major investigation. Cole understood something a lot of miners overlook. The real story of a gold deposit often isn't written on the surface. It's buried in the records nobody bothers to read anymore. So before touching a single shovel of dirt, he gathered everything he could find: years-old surveys, historic drilling logs, old assay reports, anything connected to that claim. Some of the documents were so old and neglected that they'd practically been forgotten in storage. But Cole believed that the best evidence is often sitting exactly where everyone else stopped looking. After several days of digging through that paperwork, something clicked. Multiple borehole reports from completely different years, taken by different companies, seemed to be pointing toward the same underlying pattern, but nobody had ever laid them side by side to notice it. Some spots showed faint gold traces. Others revealed unusual gravel layering that didn't match what surface-focused geologists expected. At the time, nobody paid much attention because everybody was chasing surface gold, not looking at what might be running underneath it. When Cole laid all of that scattered data out together, a new picture started to form. His theory was that an ancient buried channel, the remains of a river that had shifted and vanished millions of years ago, might be sitting beneath the claim, carrying gold that had been concentrated there over an enormous span of time. If that theory held up, it meant the real deposit wasn't in the upper layers everyone had already dug through. It was buried much deeper, untouched by any of the previous operations. That realization changed everything about how Cole approached the project. Old records alone weren't going to be enough to prove it. It was time to bring in serious technology: deep ground scanning, exploratory drilling, and advanced geological modeling. From that point forward, word started spreading, and slowly, people across the mining world began paying attention. Cole Whitman also understood that a project of this scale couldn't be built on instinct or an educated hunch. If there really was a massive gold system sitting under that abandoned ground, he needed hard evidence before doing anything else. So even before a single major excavation began, he committed serious money, not thousands, but millions of dollars to investigation and verification. A lot of people around him thought that decision was reckless. Sinking that kind of capital into land that had already been declared worthless once wasn't an easy sell to anyone. The work started with a full, deep ground scan across the claim. From there, exploratory drilling began at multiple points so that core samples could be pulled from well below where previous companies had stopped. Every sample that came up was logged, numbered, tagged with its exact depth, and shipped off for lab analysis. At the same time, Coal's geologists and engineers began building a digital model of the underground structure, merging decades-old borehole data with brand-new survey readings to get a clearer picture of what was actually down there. As the investigation pushed forward, skepticism grew right alongside it. Plenty of experienced people in the industry thought Coal was taking an unnecessary gamble. If the underground system didn't measure up to what the model suggested, he stood to lose everything he'd put into it. Some analysts openly doubted the odds of success. Coal didn't let the criticism slow him down. His answer was simple: big opportunities always come with big risk, but decisions should be driven by evidence, not fear of being wrong. Instead of scaling back, he pushed the investigation further, betting that if his geological theory was right, the incoming core samples would prove it. And then the first core samples came back, and the entire mood at the site shifted. After weeks of continuous drilling, the moment everyone had been anxious about finally arrived. Nobody expected much from the earliest samples, since initial results in projects like this are usually unremarkable. But almost immediately, geologists noticed something unusual. Certain layers were showing gold signals stronger than anyone had anticipated from a claim with this history. Even more surprising, the concentration seemed to increase the deeper the samples were pulled from. Multiple cores, taken at different points across the site, were all telling a strikingly similar story. This didn't look like an isolated pocket of gold. It looked like a much larger system running beneath the ground. Even with results like that, Coal refused to let anyone get ahead of themselves. He made it clear that jumping to conclusions off early samples alone would be a mistake. Every core was carefully documented, its depth and exact location recorded, then sent out to independent labs for detailed testing, gold grade, mineral composition, and full geological structure analysis. Back at the camp, the atmosphere had completely changed from where it started. The same people who dismissed this project as a lost cause weeks earlier were now anxiously waiting on every new report that came in. To strengthen the case further, Coal authorized an even deeper level of investigation. High-resolution ground scanners, 3D geological mapping, and digital underground modeling were deployed across the entire claim. Millions of individual data points were compiled to build out a complete underground picture, all in pursuit of a single question: what was actually hidden beneath this ground? When the first digital models were finally ready, the room where the geologists reviewed them went quiet. What showed up on the screen didn't resemble a typical, isolated gold deposit. Instead, there was a long, continuous gold-bearing zone that kept reappearing across different survey lines, all pointing in the same direction. As more data was layered in, the picture only got clearer, suggesting this wasn't a small find, but something much larger. The team cross-checked everything obsessively, old borehole data against the new core samples and both against the digital models. All three sources lined up. Veteran members of the team admitted they rarely saw signals this consistent on any project. Still, they were careful to stress that nothing would be confirmed until physical excavation and lab work backed it up. As word of Cole Whitman's project kept spreading, outside interest picked up fast. Independent geologists, mining consultants, and laboratory specialists were brought in specifically so an outside party could verify everything without any conflict of interest. Cole wanted every number checked by people who had no stake in making the results look better than they were. Those outside experts went through the same material Cole's team had: old records, new core samples, scan reports, geological models, verifying depth, location, and gold content on every single sample. Some were sent to entirely separate laboratories just to avoid relying on one source. What came back matched what Cole's own team had already found. Gold signals were consistent across multiple layers, and the concentration in the deeper zones appeared even stronger than in the upper sections. Even so, the outside experts held off on any final declaration, though they admitted this didn't look anything like a typical minor deposit. Naturally, the big question on everyone's mind became whether this could really be worth close to $1 billion. Once the early data, the core samples, scans, and geological reports had been compiled and reviewed, industry analysts started running their own numbers, building models, and estimating what the deposit could be worth if the underground zone held up at the scale the early data suggested. When those first estimates came back, they immediately drew attention across the industry. If the deep gold-bearing zone held consistent density throughout, the total value could land somewhere close to $1 billion. That kind of number, if it held up, would put Cole Whitman's name among some of the more significant gold discoveries the industry had seen in years. Cole, however, kept the same measured tone he'd had from the start. He reminded everyone that the early estimates were based on models, not confirmed reserves, and that the real answer would only come after full-scale excavation, more core sampling, and independent lab verification. He wasn't willing to treat any number as final without hard physical evidence behind it. Still, the conversation across the mining world kept building. Investors wanted updates. Other operators started pulling out old claim files of their own, wondering if similarly written off ground might be hiding something nobody had bothered to check. All eyes were now fixed on one question. Could this claim actually deliver on what the data was suggesting? Getting to that answer wasn't going to be simple. Everything collected so far had raised expectations, but the hardest part of the project hadn't even started. If a deposit of this size really existed underground, reaching it safely wouldn't be straightforward. Going deeper meant more than just running bigger machines. A single miscalculation could destroy equipment worth millions and set the entire operation back by months. Ground stability was the first major concern. As excavation pushed deeper, pressure on the upper rock layers could shift unpredictably. A collapse in the wrong section wouldn't just halt operations, it could permanently damage the very gold-bearing zone they were trying to reach. Because of that risk, the team ran stability testing and pressure analysis before opening any new section of ground. Water inflow was the second serious concern. Old records from the surrounding area showed other operations had been shut down before by sudden groundwater intrusion. To avoid a repeat of that, Cole's engineers built out a drainage plan in advance, installed continuous water monitoring equipment, and committed to logging ground moisture and pressure readings every hour throughout the operation. Nobody wanted an unexpected flood to put the entire project in jeopardy. Alongside that, there were long planning sessions around heavy equipment, deciding which machine worked which section, what backup systems needed to be ready, and how depth changes would affect operations at each stage. Every detail was mapped out ahead of time. Cole kept repeating one phrase to his crew throughout this stretch. It's not about speed, it's about accuracy. That's why he refused to rush the excavation. If there really was close to $1 billion sitting beneath that ground, a few extra days spent on safety and planning wasn't wasted time. It was the smartest move available to him. Once news of the investigation spread further through the mining industry, the reaction was immediate. A claim that had been ignored for years was suddenly the center of attention for experts, investors, and companies from all over. Several other mining operations started pulling their own old, abandoned claim files back out, reconsidering sites they'd once written off using the same modern approach Cole had applied. Investors started paying close attention too. Mining funds, private backers, and exploration firms were all tracking which direction the project was heading. If the early numbers held, it could open the door to a wave of new investment in deep gold exploration going forward. A number of analysts suggested this wasn't just a single discovery. It could mark a real shift in how the industry approached old claims altogether, moving away from strict focus on surface gold and toward deeper, more thorough geological analysis using ancient channel theory and digital modeling. Not everyone was fully convinced, though. A debate started forming within the mining community. Some believed Cole had genuinely found something historic. Others urged caution, insisting that nothing should be treated as confirmed until the physical excavation and lab results were fully in. But almost everyone agreed on one point. The next phase of digging would be the real test.